The unlocked door. The call came in at 11:47 on a Friday night. My partner, Marcus, and I were wrapping up a routine patrol near the edge of our district when dispatch broke through the static with something that made both of us sit up straight. A young woman, home alone in a residential neighborhood on the north side, had called 911 reporting footsteps somewhere below her. She was upstairs, she said. She could hear movement. Then, mid-sentence, the line went dead. No location confirmed. No floor plan. No idea where in that house she was hiding. I'd been on the force for just under 2 years at that point. I'd handled domestics, DUIs, a few bar fights that got uglier than they should have. But a live break-in, an active intruder, a terrified woman somewhere inside a house we'd never stepped foot in. That was different. That got the blood moving in a way nothing else does. We hit the street in under 3 minutes. The house was a 2-story colonial on Mercer Lane, the kind of quiet suburban street where the most exciting thing that usually happened was someone's sprinkler system going off at 2 a.m. White siding, black shutters, a front porch with a wicker chair nobody sat in. The neighborhood was dark and still, and there wasn't a single light on inside the house. Not one. The front door was unlocked. That detail, small as it sounds, landed heavy. An unlocked front door at midnight. That was how whoever came in got in. We'd confirm that later. No broken windows, no forced entry at the back. Just a door that someone hadn't thought to lock and someone else who noticed. Marcus and I drew our weapons. We both called out, loud, clear, authoritative. Police, announce yourself. Silence. We called for the homeowner. Her name was Claire Hendricks, 26 years old, graduate student, lived alone. Claire, this is the police. You're safe. Call out if you can hear us. Nothing came back. She was smart. If there was still someone in that house, she wasn't going to give away her position by responding to voices she couldn't yet verify. I respected that, even in the moment. It meant she was thinking clearly despite being terrified, and it meant we needed to move carefully. The first floor went fast. Small living room, open kitchen, half bath, laundry closet. No basement, which was a relief. Basements are the worst. Too many corners, too little light. Too many places to disappear into. We cleared the ground floor in under 4 minutes and confirmed it was empty. Then, from upstairs, a door. Not a slam. Just the soft, deliberate click of a latch catching. The sound of someone being careful. Marcus and I exchanged a look. He gestured toward the left side of the hallway, and I took the right. The staircase was hardwood, which meant every step announced itself no matter how gently I placed my feet. I kept my weapon raised and my back against the wall as I ascended. At the top of the stairs, 4 doors, all of them closed. I took the second on the right. Marcus took the one across from it. I turned the knob slowly, then pushed the door open with one swift motion, the kind where hesitation will get you killed, and stepped back, weapon up, scanning. Dark, empty. A guest room by the looks of it. Bare mattress, a few cardboard boxes stacked in the corner. A window facing the backyard. But there was breathing. Faint, shallow, controlled. The kind of breathing someone does when they're trying very hard not to make a sound. I stood still for a moment and let my ears do the work. Definitely in this room. Definitely coming from the closet. A sliding door. Cracked open maybe 4 inches. I moved toward it slowly and crouched down to the gap in the door. And there, in the thin strip of shadow between the panels, was half a face. One eye. Wide open. Looking directly at me. I kept my voice as calm as I could manage. Claire, it's the police. You're okay, you can come out. She didn't move. The breathing slowed, almost stopped. And then from across the hall, Marcus's voice. Denton, I've got her. The floor dropped out from under me. If Claire was across the hall, if Marcus had just found Claire, then the face in this closet wasn't Claire. I raised my weapon and stepped back. Come out of the closet, hands where I can see them. Now, nothing. I called Marcus in. He hit the light switch on his way through the door, and together we pulled the sliding panel open in one motion. She was crouched on the floor, barely 5 feet tall, hair matted, eyes glassy and unfocused in the way that told you substances were involved. She was clutching a kitchen knife against her chest, one of those long serrated ones you use for bread, with both hands wrapped around the handle. 2 guns, 1 knife. She made the right call and set it down. We got her out of that house and into custody without anyone getting hurt. Claire was shaken but physically unharmed. The woman in the closet had entered through the front door, opportunistically from what we could piece together, and had been in the house for close to an hour before the call came in. I transferred to a quieter precinct the following year, and I haven't taken a break-in call since. I don't miss them. Dead weight at exit 74. 15 years as a state trooper teaches you things that no academy ever could. It teaches you that 2 a.m. on an interstate is its own world, a parallel reality that runs alongside the one most people live in, populated by long-haul drivers, insomniacs, and people doing things they'd rather not explain. In 15 years, I'd seen enough of that world to stop being surprised by most of it. Most of it. This particular night I'm thinking of happened back when I was still in my early 30s, 7, maybe 8 years into the job. I was running night patrol on EI 78 eastbound. It was mid-November, cold enough that the asphalt had that particular sheen to it, the kind that looks wet but isn't. I'd had my cruiser parked behind a stand of pine trees near mile marker 61 for the better part of an hour, watching for speeders, but the traffic had thinned out considerably past midnight. Around 2:15, I decided to reposition. I pulled out and drove east for a few miles, eventually pulling into a gas station at exit 74. The station had been closed, not for the night, but indefinitely. Pumps decommissioned, windows papered over, fluorescents off. There was an old branded canopy over the pump islands, but the signage had been taken down and only the mounting brackets remained. 2 cars were parked in the lot, side by side. No one visible inside either of them. I sat in my cruiser for about 30 seconds and watched. No movement, no smoke from the exhaust. Just 2 cars parked next to each other at a closed gas station at 2:15 in the morning, with no one in them. I positioned my car so I had sightlines to both the lot and the interstate on-ramp, then stepped out with my hand resting near my belt. I approached both vehicles and knocked on the driver's side windows, one at a time. Empty. Both of them. I walked the perimeter of the property slowly, sweeping my flashlight along the pavement and then up the side of the building. The windows were dark behind their paper coverings. The side door was padlocked. Nothing was obviously broken or disturbed. I turned toward the tree line at the back of the lot, a narrow strip of woods that separated the station from the embankment running down to the highway. And I was just beginning to frame the question in my mind when someone came running around the corner of the building. Young guy, maybe 23, 24, hoodie, jeans, sneakers. He was breathing hard, like he'd been moving fast for a while, and he stopped about 10 feet from me with his hands partially raised. Not the hands-up gesture of someone who's scared of a cop, more the reflexive posture of someone who's startled and trying to communicate that he's not a threat. He told me his car wouldn't start, said he'd tried to get it going for the past 20 minutes and couldn't figure out what was wrong. He asked, practically begged, if I'd take a look under the hood with him. Now, I'm not a mechanic. I told him that right away. I told him I could call a tow truck, get him a number, make sure he wasn't stranded out here all night. But he kept at it, kept insisting. Just a second, just take a look. Maybe it's something obvious. He walked to the car, the one on the left, and popped the hood. I followed. I'll be honest with you. I wasn't focused on the engine. I was focused on him, the way he kept glancing to his left, not at me, not at his car, past me into the dark. It's something I wasn't looking at. Whose car is that? I asked, nodding toward the second vehicle. He said he didn't know. Said he'd pulled in and it was already there. I was already reaching that place in my gut. The one 15 years on the interstate will develop in you. Where something feels chemically wrong, where your body knows before your brain catches up. I turned to look at where his eyes kept drifting. There was a man walking toward me from the far side of the lot. He had something in his right hand. I didn't wait to identify it. I drew and issued a verbal command in one motion. The knife dropped. Both men put their hands up immediately, which told me something, because people who are innocent and surprised don't always get their hands up that fast and that clean. These two had thought about what would happen if a cop drew on them. They'd rehearsed it. I cuffed the one with the knife and locked him in the back of my cruiser, retrieved my secondary cuffs from the glove box, and secured the second man. Called for backup, gave my position, and waited. When the backup units arrived, I went around to the back of the building, to the tree line, where the first young man had come running from. What I found there is something I've described exactly 3 times in 15 years. Once in my official report, once to my wife, about a month later when she asked why I wasn't sleeping, and once to a department counselor who was required by our union contract to keep it confidential. I'm describing it a 4th time now because I think it's important that people understand what's actually out there in the dark alongside them when they're driving home late at night. 2 bodies, wrapped in black contractor bags, the heavy mill kind. Each body had been cut. I'll leave the specifics where they belong, which is in the incident report. Cut and folded to fit inside a single bag. 4 bags total, 2 per person, stacked and bound with zip ties. Next to them, leaning against a concrete wheel stop at the edge of the pavement, a shovel. They had been planning to carry those bags into the woods and bury them somewhere off the embankment. The interstate noise would cover the digging. The closed station would keep casual traffic out. By daylight, those bags would have been in the ground, and 2 people would have simply ceased to exist in any way the world could find them. What stopped them was the fact that they'd parked both cars where I could see them from the road. Dumb. Catastrophically, almost absurdly dumb. I didn't sleep well for months after that, not because of the fear. The danger had passed quickly, but because of the math of it. If I'd stayed parked back at mile marker 61, I wouldn't have seen those cars. If I'd driven past the exit instead of pulling in, I wouldn't have seen those cars, whoever those 2 people were. And I'm not going to use this to get into the details of the investigation. They came within about 15 minutes of getting away with it. That's the thing about 15 years on the interstate. You learn that most of what goes right is luck, and most of what goes wrong is too. The dial tone. I'm going to tell you something that still keeps me up at night, and I've been on the force for going on 3 years now. I work nights. Patrol officer, standard sector rotation, traffic stops, welfare checks, noise complaints, the occasional disturbance call. My district covers a mix of residential neighborhoods and light commercial. The kind of area where things are usually quiet, but occasionally aren't. I was about 4 months in when this happened, still in that phase where every shift felt like it could contain anything. 2 nights in a row, I got sent to the same address. The first night, it was a standard 911 hang-up check. happens more than people realize. Someone dials by accident, or a phone gets bumped in a pocket, or a kid picks something up they shouldn't. Dispatch logged it and sent me out as a precaution. The house was a single-story ranch on Creston Road, set back from the street at the end of a long dirt driveway that curved through a stand of old oak trees. No streetlights out there. Just the driveway disappearing into the dark between the trees. I drove up slowly. The property opened into a clearing, the house sitting in the middle of it, surrounded by overgrown grass and what used to be a flower bed along the front. No cars, no lights, every window dark. The front door was locked, and after knocking twice with no response, I made a reasonable assessment. The property had been vacant for some time. The 911 call was a glitch or a misdial from a number still associated with the old landline, and there was nothing here that needed my attention. I called it in as clear and went home. The second night, I was maybe 4 miles away when dispatch came across my radio with the same address. Same house on Creston Road. But this time, the dispatcher told me something different. There was audio on the line before it dropped. Someone crying. Not a malfunction. Not a misdial. Crying. I drove out to Creston Road again. Same dark driveway. Same clearing. Same unlit house sitting in the middle of all that quiet. But this time the front door was cracked open about 2 inches. Not wide open, just cracked. Like someone had pulled it behind them, but the latch hadn't caught. I knocked. No answer. Called out. No answer. I radioed dispatch and requested clearance to enter based on the distress call. They cleared me. I drew my weapon. Inside the house was the kind of dark that has weight to it. I couldn't find a light switch near the door, and my flashlight cut a narrow cone through the blackness that made everything outside it feel more threatening than it probably was. I swept the main room, stripped bare, just bare walls and bare floors, the smell of old wood and something faintly chemical underneath it. Whatever furniture had once been there was long gone. And then I heard it. From behind a door on the far side of the room, a tone. Steady, continuous, mechanical. The unmistakable sound of a phone off the hook. That flat, nasal drone that landlines make when no one's on the other end. The door was the basement door. I called it in to dispatch and requested backup, keeping my voice low. Then I started down the stairs. The basement was unfinished. Concrete floor, exposed joists overhead, a single bare bulb on a pull chain in the center of the ceiling that I didn't touch. My flashlight found the source of the tone almost immediately. An old cordless landline from the early 2000s sitting on a folding table near the foot of the stairs, receiver off the cradle, speaker facing up, filling the whole basement with that flat, dead sound. I put the receiver back on the cradle. The tone stopped. In the silence that followed, and it was the kind of silence that rushes in to fill a space the moment a persistent sound is removed, I heard something from the far end of the basement. A laugh. Not a real laugh. Not a surprised laugh or a nervous laugh, or a laugh born out of genuine amusement. This was something else. A sound produced by a person in a state I don't have better clinical language to describe than broken. Compressed, rhythmic, the syllables of laughter without the actual emotion behind them, coming from the far corner of the basement where my flashlight beam ended, and the dark began again. I raised my weapon and tracked the beam toward the sound. A man was standing in the corner. He was tall, 6 feet, maybe more, and he was dressed in dark clothes that had made him invisible against the basement wall. His right hand was over his mouth, and his shoulders were moving with each repetition of that sound. His left hand was at his side, and in it he was holding something that caught the light in a way that made my stomach drop. Before my brain could even process what I was seeing, a revolver. Drop the weapon. Drop it now. Hands where I can see them. He didn't drop it. He raised it. Not toward me. Toward himself. He pressed the barrel to his temple, and the laugh stopped. And for a single second, the basement was completely silent, and I understood with total clarity what I was about to witness if I didn't act in the next half second. I fired twice. Both shots hit his arm. The revolver clattered across the concrete floor, and he went down, screaming. And I was on him before he'd finished falling. Cuffed, stabilized, radioing for medical on my way back up the stairs. The ambulance arrived inside of 4 minutes. My backup unit pulled up 30 seconds after that. He survived. I don't know what happened to him after that night. That's not information that comes back to the patrol officer who pulled the trigger, usually. But he was alive when they loaded him onto that stretcher, and that was the outcome I'd made the choice to fight for. People have asked me since then what the scariest part of that night was. They expect me to say it was the moment I fired, or the moment I saw the gun, or the walk down those basement stairs. It wasn't any of those. The scariest part was the 2 seconds between when he raised the gun and when I made my decision. Because in those 2 seconds, I understood that I was not going to be able to talk him out of it, and that the only remaining option was to hurt him in order to save him, and that I was going to have to live with whatever happened next for the rest of my career. I'd do it again, instantly. But it doesn't leave you. Blood on the walls. This one I'm going to tell you about my partner because she's the one who saw the worst of it. Her name is Renata. 12 years on the force, 6 of them with me. She's one of those officers who seems completely unflappable in the field. Calm voice, steady hands. Never raises her tempo even when everything around her is falling apart. I've watched her talk people off ledges, literally and figuratively, more times than I can count. She's better at this job than most people I've ever worked with. But she called me 2 nights after this particular welfare check, and she didn't sound like herself. The call came in on a Tuesday. Ex-boyfriend had reached out to dispatch after receiving a series of text messages from a woman named Tanya. Messages that, read together, painted a picture no one wanted to interpret correctly. Things like, "I can't keep doing this and I should have held on when I had the chance," and the one that got patrol dispatched immediately. "I don't think I'm supposed to still be here." We got to the apartment building in under 10 minutes. 3rd floor walk-up in a complex near the university district. The kind of building that felt slightly transient. Rotating roster of graduate students and young professionals, nobody knowing their neighbors particularly well. We knocked. We knocked harder. We called the number the ex had provided and heard the phone ring through the door. Heard it get answered. Heard breathing on the line for approximately 2 seconds, and then the call ended. She was in there. We announced that we'd be making entry if there was no response. We heard something from inside. Renata described it later as a sound like words being made from very far away. And then the lock turned. But the door didn't open. We pushed it inward. Tanya was standing in the center of her living room. She was soaking wet, hair plastered to her face, wearing only a towel that had fallen loose at one side. Her skin had a color to it that I've only ever seen a handful of times in this job. That particular gray-white that lives on the far edge of what a living person's skin should look like. She was swaying almost imperceptibly, the way a tree does in a wind that isn't quite strong enough to make a sound. Her hands were bleeding. We called for an ambulance before we'd said another word. Renata moved to her side immediately and spoke to her quietly. I don't know exactly what she said, just that she used a tone I'd recognize anywhere. The voice you use when you need someone to stay with you. Tanya was transported to the hospital. She survived. Now the part that Renata called me about 2 nights later. While we'd been waiting for the ambulance, we'd done a safety sweep of the apartment. Standard procedure. None of the overhead lights would turn on. We'd find out later the breakers had been switched off. So we'd moved through the space with our flashlights. The bathroom. A clawfoot tub filled with water that had gone completely dark. Not dirty, dark. The deep, opaque brown of water that's been mixed with enough blood over a long enough period of time that it no longer resembles water at all. Our best estimate, based on what the medical team told us later, was that she'd been in that tub for somewhere between 3 and 4 hours. The bedroom, candles burning on the windowsill, the dresser, the floor beside the bed. And on the walls, written carefully in neat lines, in the particular reddish-brown that dried blood becomes, scripture, long passages, some of them. Carefully transcribed, letters even, and deliberate, covering 2 full walls of the room floor to ceiling. Renata stood in that doorway for a moment before she could move. She told me on the phone that it wasn't the gore that got to her. She'd seen worse in her career in terms of pure physical aftermath. It was the handwriting, the care of it, the fact that in whatever state Tanya had been in, whatever she'd been experiencing in those hours, she'd taken the time to write carefully, to make the letters neat, to stay inside the lines, like she was trying to leave something behind that was worth reading, Renata said. I didn't have an answer for that. I still don't. Tanya recovered. Renata took 3 days of personal leave the following week. First time in 6 years I'd seen her do that. And when she came back, she didn't talk about it again, and I didn't ask her to. Some things in this job you carry differently than others. The figures on the deck. Burlington, New Jersey has a crime rate that sits roughly 85% above the national average. I know that because when I was assigned there coming out of the academy, the officer who showed me around my first week said it without any editorializing whatsoever, just a flat statement, delivered the way you'd tell someone the local pizza place closed at 10. You adjusted. You learned the calls. After a while, the break-ins and the assaults and the aggravated disturbances filed themselves into a kind of grim routine, and you handled them the way you handled everything else. Carefully, professionally, and with the understanding that tonight was probably not going to be the worst night you'd ever have. That said, some calls found ways to be different. Anyone who spent time in that district knew the Holloway estate. Technically, it sits just outside the township line, back off a county road that runs parallel to the river. The original structure dated to the 1880s, built by a local industrialist for his family, then passed down through various owners until the last of them vacated the property sometime in the early 1970s. The county had owned it since then. There was talk every few years about what to do with it: restoration, demolition, historical preservation. But nothing ever came of any of it, and so the building sat where it had always sat, getting older and emptier and stranger. Locals had feelings about that house. On a warm Thursday night in late September, I was running patrol through the area when dispatch flagged me on a trespassing complaint. A neighbor about a quarter mile from the estate had called in to report seeing someone hop the fence on the property boundary. I acknowledged the call and turned toward the county road. The driveway was overgrown. I parked at the gate and went in on foot with my flashlight, sweeping the ground ahead of me as I walked. The property opened up into what had once been an elaborate lawn, now mostly tall grass and scattered fieldstone, and the main house rose at the far end of it like something out of a photograph that wasn't meant for daytime. 3 stories, wraparound porch, partially collapsed on the left side, upper windows mostly intact but filmed with decades of dust and oxidation, dark in every one of them, except one. Second floor, far right window, a light, faint, yellowish, moving slightly. The unmistakable flicker of a flashlight or a candle being carried. There was someone up there. I requested backup over my radio and stated I'd be making entry. I found an access point quickly, a ground floor window on the south side where the glass had been broken out at some point and the frame had been left open. I squeezed through it and landed inside what I was fairly certain had been the main parlor, based on the size of the room and the remnants of what might have once been built-in shelving along one wall. The floor was covered, not just with dust, with decades of accumulated debris. Plaster that had fallen from the ceiling in chunks, old insulation material, what appeared to be pages of a water-damaged newspaper, miscellaneous hardware. Every step I took announced itself to the entire structure. I called out, "Police officer, if anyone's on this property, make yourself known." From somewhere above me, footsteps, quick ones, then quiet. I found the staircase and went up. The second floor was a hallway with 4 doors, all of them standing open except the last one on the right. The debris here was even thicker. The ceiling in this section had caved in at some point, and the material had never been removed. I moved slowly, flashlight sweeping, listening. Something fell in a room to my left. A small sound. Something knocked off a surface or a piece of debris settling. But enough to pull my attention. I tried the room to my left first. Small, square, with a bank of windows on the exterior wall. The glass in these was intact, but covered with a thick film of grime that diffused any light passing through it into something soft and directionless. A closet on the interior wall stood open about 3/4. I took out my secondary. I'd already decided the situation didn't feel like it warranted my firearm, and announced myself one final time before pulling the closet door all the way open. Empty. I stood in that room for a moment and ran my flashlight along the walls, the floor, the windows, and that's when I saw it. Not in the room. On the other side of the glass, there was a deck out there, a narrow covered porch running along the exterior of the second floor. And standing on the deck, visible through the grimy window film as a dark silhouette, was a figure. Still, not moving, just standing there at the window, oriented inward, looking into the room, looking at me. I kept my light on the figure and moved toward the window. There was a second figure, different window, same posture, facing inward, still looking. And a third, 3 of them, spread across 3 separate windows of that deck, each one standing at their own pane of grimy glass, each one facing the same direction. All of them looking in. I found the door to the deck through the adjacent room. I pushed through it and stepped outside. The deck was empty. 3 positions, 3 windows, not a person at any of them. I stood on that deck for maybe 20 seconds, turning in a slow circle, confirming with my own eyes that there was nowhere to go from here. No exterior staircase, no ladder, no trellis, except back through the door I'd come out of. And then my radio crackled. Backup had arrived. 2 more officers pulling into the lot at the end of the overgrown driveway. I went down to meet them, brought them back inside and up to the second floor, and showed them the deck, the windows, the 3 positions. Described what I'd seen. Watch their faces do the thing faces do when someone tells them something they don't have a category for. We searched the estate together. All 3 floors, every room, every closet we could safely open without the risk of the structure coming down on us. We found evidence of regular trespassing, recent cigarette butts, a few empty cans, a tarp that someone had stretched across a corner of the 3rd floor as makeshift shelter. But we found no one. Before we closed up the building, one of the other officers spotted something outside the first-floor window on the north side. Something at the glass. He moved toward it slowly, flashlight tracking, trying to determine if what he was looking at was a person's silhouette or just a shadow thrown by his own beam. It descended. Whatever it was, it dropped below the window frame before he could get close enough to identify it. We swept the perimeter for another 15 minutes. Nothing. The report I filed that night described what I observed accurately and without embellishment. 3 figures visible through second-floor windows. Deck found empty upon entry. First-floor exterior anomaly unidentified. All exits secured. Property cleared. What the report did not capture, because there is no field in a Burlington County trespassing form for this, was the way it felt to stand on that deck in the dark and understand that something had been there a moment ago, close enough to the glass to have a silhouette, oriented inward, watching, and was now simply not there anymore. I finished my contract in Burlington 8 months later and requested a transfer. 3 figures at 3 windows, all of them looking in. I still think about it more than I'd like.